"Dad," she said, tugging his sleeve. "She looks hungry. Can we go say hello to her?" He looked up and saw her, a young woman curled near a lamppost, thin, pale, trembling from more than just cold. In that instant, this powerful man had a choice: look away or follow his daughter's heart. What happened next? It was the beginning of something no one expected, least of all the woman on the ground. If you believe compassion still has the power to rewrite lives, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment to tell us where in the world you're watching from. Or just say, "I'm with you, Mr. Heartline." Let's begin. The city hummed softly in the background as a late afternoon sun dipped low over San Francisco's Pacific horizon. The park was unusually calm for a Tuesday. Light chatter drifted from nearby food trucks. The smell of grilled meat and sourdough bread lingered in the breeze. At a wooden bench near the center fountain, Silas Maddox sat with one leg crossed over the other, fork in hand, poking at a mostly untouched salad. His navy suit jacket was folded beside him. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing a stainless steel watch and arms built for more stress than the gym. His face looked like it forgot how to smile and hadn't missed it since. Across from him, little Tessa swayed her legs beneath the bench, humming off-key as she nibbled a grilled cheese sandwich. 5 years old and full of questions. Her curls were tied into 2 uneven puffballs, her daisy print dress smudged with ketchup from an earlier fry. She chewed slowly, eyes flicking from her dad, to the trees, to the passers-by, and then they stopped. She tugged at his shirt. "Daddy." He looked up, drawn out of his daze. "Yeah, sweetheart." She pointed across the street with half her sandwich still in hand. Silas followed her gaze. Near a lamppost, half in shade, a woman sat on the curb, her knees tucked to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around her body. She was barefoot. Her sundress looked like it hadn't seen a laundry machine in months. Her hair was tangled, her shoulders hunched. But what hit Silas most was her stillness. She wasn't panhandling. She wasn't speaking. She was just there, fading. "Daddy, she looks hungry," Tessa whispered. "Can we go say hello to her?" Silas hesitated. He looked back at his daughter's eyes. Big, brown, insistent. He sighed, pushing the salad aside. "Let's go." Tessa beamed, hopping off the bench with her sandwich still in hand. Silas followed behind, loosening his tie further. As they crossed the street, the woman noticed them approaching and tried to shift upright. Her limbs were slow to respond. She looked up with startled eyes, blue, glassy, dry. "I'm sorry," she rasped, voice barely there. "I wasn't bothering anyone. I just needed to sit." "You're not bothering us," Silas said gently, crouching beside her. Tessa took a small step forward, holding out the sandwich with both hands. "It's still warm," she said quietly. "You can have it if you're really hungry." The woman blinked fast, tears threatening to spill. She took the sandwich with both hands, her fingers shaking. "Thank you." Silas stood and said, "I'll be right back." The woman looked confused but didn't speak. Tessa sat cross-legged beside her like it was the most normal thing in the world. The woman didn't eat yet. She just stared at the sandwich, still stunned. Tessa leaned toward her. "My name's Tessa. What's yours?" "Nella," the woman replied softly. "That's pretty," Tessa smiled. "I'm 5. You look really tired." Nella exhaled a breath that could have been a laugh. "Yeah, I am." Moments later, Silas returned holding a paper bag and a bottle of water. "Here," he said, offering the bag. "Soup, sandwich, and some water." Nella reached for it slowly. "I don't know what to say." "Start with eating," Silas replied. She nodded, her lips pressing into a line as she opened the soup container with trembling fingers. Tessa stayed right beside her, humming again while staring at the sky. Silas remained standing, hands in his pockets, watching them both. And in that stillness, between a billionaire who'd forgotten how to feel and a woman who looked like she'd lost everything, something invisible passed through them. A quiet beginning. Nella ate slowly, every movement careful, almost shy. Her fingers wrapped around the sandwich like it might disappear. The first bite made her eyes flutter shut. The second came with a quiet sigh. She didn't speak much, but hunger didn't leave room for words. Silas stood silently nearby, watching her from a respectful distance. He wasn't a stranger to discomfort. He had seen boardrooms full of men pretending they had nothing to lose. But this? A woman too ashamed to ask for food in a city full of waste? That unsettled something deep inside him. Tessa leaned sideways, gently brushing her shoulder against Nella's. You can sit with us next time. Daddy always buys too much food. Nella chuckled under her breath. You're sweet. Silas cleared his throat. You've been out here long? Nella didn't look up. Couple weeks. It's not always like this. Just, this time I didn't land as clean. He nodded slowly. She didn't know him details. Where are you staying? Nella paused. Different places. Tonight I was thinking maybe the shelter on 8th, if I get there before 6. Don't go there, Silas said flatly. It's not safe for anyone, especially not women alone. She glanced up at him then. You know the shelter? I fund it, he said with no pride in his voice. I've seen the reports. The place is broken. Nella blinked, unsure what to say. Tessa broke the tension. Do you like purple or pink better? She asked. Nella looked at her, startled. Purple, I guess. Me too, Tessa beamed. A passing jogger slowed, stared at the scene. Well-dressed man, child, and clearly homeless woman. Silas caught the look and stepped forward, blocking the view. Nella noticed. I should go. You need rest, he said. I'll be fine, she replied. But she wasn't fine. That much was written all over her. Skin too pale, eyes too tired, shoulders too tight. Silas had seen executives bluff their way through disasters. This wasn't bluff. This was collapse wearing a human face. Tessa stood up. We have a guest room. Nella, Silas said carefully. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering space. Just for the night. A shower. A meal. A door that locks. She looked between him and his daughter, then down at her lap. I shouldn't. Please, Tessa interrupted, reaching for her hand. It's warm at our house, and you can meet Mrs. Levette. She makes the best cookies ever. Nella's fingers hesitated before closing around Tessa's small hand. Silas waited, saying nothing more. Finally, Nella exhaled. Okay, just tonight. Silas nodded once. Let's get you home. The ride to the house was quiet. Nella sat in the back with Tessa, who kept her talking the entire way. About princesses, about pancakes, about the wildflowers she and her dad were growing in the backyard. Nella responded with soft nods and occasional smiles. Her hands folded neatly in her lap as if unsure where else to put them. When the car curved up a private hill lined with lantern-lit trees and stopped in front of a modern home made of stone and glass, Nella didn't speak. Silas opened her door but didn't say a word. Tessa grabbed Nella's hand like she had every right to. Nella froze at the welcome mat. She stood there for a beat too long. Her dress was wrinkled and clung in the wrong places. Her skin itched with city dust. The back of her hair was still matted from the nights she'd spent sleeping upright. Inside, golden light spilled from the windows like an invitation and a warning. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. But Tessa tugged her hand. Please come in. It's warm inside. So she did. The entryway smelled like something sweet and citrusy. Polished floors. Minimalist decor. Everything expensive without shouting it. But what struck Nella most wasn't the beauty. It was the stillness. The silence of a house too quiet to be called a home. Silas called softly, Mrs. Levette? From the hallway, a kind-eyed woman in her 60s emerged. Apron on, hair tied in a bun. You're back early, she said. Then her eyes fell on Nella. She's staying the night, Silas explained. She needs rest. Mrs. Levette didn't ask questions. Of course. She turned to Nella with a gentle smile. Come, dear. Let's get you settled. The guest room smelled faintly of lavender. A folded robe lay on the bed. The bathroom gleamed. A clean towel. A toothbrush still in its wrapper. Things Nella hadn't touched in weeks. She stood in front of the mirror after showering, water dripping from her elbows, staring at a woman she barely recognized. Thinner, paler, but still standing. Downstairs, Silas stood in the kitchen with Mrs. Levett. "She doesn't need questions tonight," he said. Mrs. Levett nodded. "She won't get them from me." Later, Nella lay in bed with the covers pulled to her chest. She whispered into the dark, "Just once. Don't fall for him. Just don't." Then she closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. Sunlight filtered through pale curtains, warm and gold. The guest room stirred softly. No alarm, no noise, just the hush of a safe morning. Nella blinked awake, unsure of where she was for a moment. The sheets were too clean, the mattress too soft. She sat up slowly, brushing hair from her eyes. Her body ached in the way it does after weeks of tension finally give way to rest. There was a knock at the door. She tensed. "It's just me, Sweet Pea," Mrs. Levett's voice called. "I brought breakfast." Nella stood, pulling the robe over her frame. She opened the door a crack. On a tray sat eggs, toast, fresh orange slices, and a cup of tea. A clean set of clothes rested neatly on the armchair. Sweats and a t-shirt that looked like they hadn't been worn in years. Mrs. Levett didn't pry. "Bathroom's yours for as long as you need it." "Thank you," Nella said, almost too quietly to hear. She ate in silence. Every bite grounded her. Every sip warmed places inside her she didn't know had gone cold. Later that morning, she stepped out into the hallway, unsure of what to do or where to go. She expected the house to be empty. It wasn't. From the back sunroom came a small voice. "Tilt your brush like this," Tessa said. Nella peeked around the doorway. Tessa sat at a little white table, her tongue peeking out as she dragged a paintbrush across thick paper. Watercolors were splattered everywhere. On her dress, on the floor, on her elbow. Silas sat beside her, sleeves rolled up again, tie gone. His paper, completely blank. Tessa spotted Nella instantly. "You're awake," she chirped. "Come paint with us." Nella hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "You're not," Silas said, looking up. "She's been asking for you since breakfast." Nella smiled faintly. "Let me get dressed." She returned minutes later, hair damp, clean clothes on. She stepped into the sunroom slowly, then knelt beside Tessa. "What are we painting?" she asked. Tessa pointed to her messy canvas. "This is a unicorn flying over our house." "And yours?" Nella asked Silas. He turned his blank paper around. "Creative block." Tessa giggled. "Daddy's terrible at painting." Nella glanced at the colors. "Do you have any extra paper?" Tessa passed her a sheet. And just like that, Nella began to paint, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. The morning turned into early afternoon without anyone noticing. Watercolors spilled across the table. Tessa laughed at her own drawings. Bright, wild, barely contained in the lines. Silas had given up trying to be precise and was instead finger-painting a tree that looked more like a green mushroom. But Nella? Nella painted with hands that remembered more than they should have. Her lines were deliberate, soft, graceful. Her brush moved like it had been aching to speak again. Tessa leaned over. "You're really good." Nella smiled. "I used to draw a lot. Before." "Before what?" Silas looked up at that but said nothing. Nella paused. "Before I stopped believing anyone would ever see it." Tessa reached out and touched Nella's arm. "I see it." Silas watched them quietly. Something unspoken tightened in his chest. Nella shifted the paper she was working on. It showed a child holding hands with a woman beneath a wide tree. The colors were warm. The lines were gentle. Tessa peered closer. "Is that me?" "Yes. And her. She's someone you described," Nella said softly. Tessa beamed. "That's Mommy." Silas froze. He hadn't heard Tessa talk about her mother in weeks. He stood and stepped closer, looking at the image. "You've never seen a photo," he said. Nella nodded. "I know, but," Tessa described her so clearly, "I just painted what I felt." He looked at the drawing. The resemblance was uncanny. More than facial features, it captured something else. Something deeper. You painted her soul, he said, voice low. Their eyes met for the first time that day. Neither looked away. Just then, Mrs. Levett peeked into the room. Lunch? Silas cleared his throat. We'll be right there. Nella turned back to the painting, pretending to fix a line that didn't need fixing. But her hands were trembling. And Silas? He walked away slower than usual, because something in him had started to stir, and he didn't yet know how to name it. That evening, after dinner, the house fell into a peaceful hush. Tessa had insisted on one more bedtime story, and Silas had obliged. Nella remained in the sunroom, cleaning the brushes, stacking papers, wiping the table with soft, practiced strokes. She paused at the edge of the last painting she'd done. Tessa laughing under a sunburst sky. She smiled, but it faded quickly. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the glass windows. Nella stood and moved to the back porch, slipping into the robe she'd left near the door. Barefoot, she stepped outside, hugging her arms around herself. The city lights blinked below, cars like ants, distant, safe. She didn't hear Silas until the door clicked behind her. I used to come out here every night, he said, stepping beside her. She nodded. It's quiet. Too quiet, he replied. Nella looked down at her feet. I've applied for a job. Silas turned to her. Where? The library. Just part-time. There's a posting near the mission. It's not much, but it's something. He nodded. You don't have to rush. I do, she said. This place, it's not mine. And it can't be. I appreciate it more than you know. But I don't want to get used to it. Silas said nothing. Nella turned her body slightly. You've been kind. But kindness can feel dangerous when you've had it ripped away before. He stepped forward slowly. What if I don't want this to be temporary? She inhaled sharply. Why? Because you've brought something into this house I didn't know I missed. And every time I see you with Tessa, or hear you laugh, it feels like coming up for air. Nella's voice shook. I'm not who you think I am. He stepped closer. Then show me. He raised his hand, then stopped. But she leaned in first. Their lips met like they'd both been holding their breath. Soft, careful, real. When they parted, her eyes stayed closed. I haven't, she whispered. Since, me neither, he murmured. She smiled. Then maybe we don't rush. But we don't run either. He took her hand. And that night, for the first time, she didn't return to the guest room. The door to Silas's bedroom closed with a quiet click. Nella stood just inside, still barefoot, her fingers tracing the edge of the robe. Her heartbeat thrummed loudly in her ears. Not from fear, but from something that felt far more dangerous. Hope. Silas didn't speak. He didn't move too quickly either. He simply stepped toward her, letting her set the pace. She let the robe fall from her shoulders. He caught it before it hit the floor, folded it once, and placed it gently on a nearby chair. Then he turned back to her. No rush, no assumptions. His eyes roamed her face, not her body, her collarbone, her mouth, the worry still tucked at the corners of her brow. He lifted a hand, brushing a curl from her cheek. If you change your mind at any moment, say so. She shook her head. I've lived in silence for too long. Tonight, I want to feel something real. Their bodies met slowly, skin against skin, heat drawn by proximity rather than urgency. Her hands slid up his chest, memorizing the texture of his breath. His fingers curled around her waist, not to pull, but to steady. They kissed, deep, unhurried, careful. When he lowered her onto the bed, he didn't press for more. He waited. She guided him. He undressed her with reverence, not desire alone. He lingered at her shoulder, her stomach, her hip. Her breath hitched when he kissed her inner thigh. He paused. She nodded. Yes, Silas. His mouth explored her like art, his touch like rhythm. She gasped, back arching as pleasure overtook her body. She trembled against his tongue, her hand gripping the sheets, her voice breaking as release flooded through her. She wasn't fragile. She was rediscovering power. He rose, kissed her mouth again, and entered her slowly. She cried out, more from memory than pain. He held her tighter. They moved in tandem, quietly, every movement laced with emotion. When they collapsed together, breathing hard, her eyes glistened. I forgot what it felt like, she whispered. To be wanted for who I am. He kissed her temple. I never stopped wanting, he said. I just forgot how to hope. Morning light spilled across Silas's room, casting a glow on tangled sheets and quiet breathing. Nella stirred first, eyes blinking open slowly as she took in the unfamiliar, but warm, setting. His arm was wrapped loosely around her waist. His chest rose and fell against her shoulder blade. For a second, she froze. Then she softened. Carefully, she turned to face him. His eyes were already open, watching her. You okay? He asked, voice husky with sleep. She nodded. More than I expected to be. They lay there for a while in silence. No rush, no demands. Just breath and skin and the strange comfort of someone who didn't expect her to disappear. Eventually, she slipped out of bed, pulling on one of his shirts from the armchair. It hung loose on her frame as she tiptoed down the hall. Mrs. Levette was already in the kitchen, whisking something in a glass bowl. Nella cleared her throat. Morning. Mrs. Levette turned, smiled knowingly, and said nothing. She simply poured coffee and slid a mug across the counter. You want to sit? She asked. Nella did. I was thinking, she began cautiously. If it's okay, maybe I could stay just a little longer? Until I start work. Mrs. Levette didn't even blink. You never needed to ask. Upstairs, Silas got Tessa ready for the day, ponytails and all. She came down barefoot, dragging her pink hoodie behind her. When she saw Nella at the counter, her eyes lit up. You're still here. I am, Nella smiled. Tessa climbed onto the stool beside her. Good. I didn't want you to leave. Silas entered moments later, leaning against the doorway with his arms crossed. He didn't say anything at first, just watched them. The way Nella's hand brushed a crumb from Tessa's cheek. The way Tessa leaned into her like she'd always belonged there. And without saying a word, he knew. This wasn't temporary anymore. Weeks passed. There were no declarations, no labels, no definitions. Just the rhythm of three people figuring out how to share a home. Nella started her part-time job at the Mission District Library. Quiet, humble work. Sorting books, helping kids with their reading logs, shelving new titles. It was far from glamorous, but it was hers. She came home every afternoon to Tessa waiting on the porch, art supplies in hand, ready to paint under the pergola. Sometimes they just drew shapes. Sometimes they made stories up as they went. Silas worked from home more often now. His office lights stayed off longer. He took calls on mute and found reasons to step into the sunroom, just to check in. One evening, while folding laundry, Nella paused with one of Silas's dress shirts in hand. She lifted it to her face, inhaling softly. Not because she missed him, he was just downstairs, but because something about this life still felt borrowed. That same night, Silas found her at the kitchen counter, sketching with a pencil on the back of a receipt. What's that? She angled it so he could see. A rough drawing of a little girl standing between a man and a woman, each holding one of her hands. Silas stared at it. She asked me today if she could call me her second favorite person, Nella said. After you. He smiled. You're doing something right. She hesitated. Are we? He stepped forward, closing the distance. Does it feel wrong? She shook her head. It feels delicate. Silas traced his fingers along the edge of the drawing. Not delicate. Intentional. She met his gaze, then nodded. Later that week, she found her watercolor set sitting on her side of the bed. A note tucked inside read, Let's build something. Not label it. Just build. She tucked the note inside her sketchbook. And that night, when they lay down beside each other, they didn't talk. They simply reached for one another and let the quiet do the rest. The sky had turned gray by mid-morning. A light drizzle kissed the sidewalk outside the Mission District Library. Inside, Nella shelved children's books by title, humming softly, her braids slipping over her shoulder. She felt lighter these days. She still wore simple clothes, still walked with quiet steps. But now, she moved with a presence she hadn't carried before. Kids in the neighborhood had started recognizing her. A little girl named Janie brought her a drawing of a unicorn on Tuesday. A boy named Luis asked her to read out loud because her voice didn't make the scary part scary. She was rebuilding, and it was real. But just as she reached the W section, a voice behind her shattered the moment. Well, look at you. She froze. The book in her hand slipped, hitting the carpet with a soft thud. She turned slowly. There he was. Greasy jacket, crooked grin, loud presence that took up more air than it earned. Then, he stepped closer. Never thought I'd find you playing teacher in a city library. Keep your voice down, she said through clenched teeth. You ran off with a rich guy, huh? His laugh echoed through the quiet room. Classy move. I didn't run anywhere, she snapped, glancing toward the kids' section. A mother nearby looked over. Nella forced a tight smile and lowered her voice. What do you want? I want what you owe, Ben said. You disappeared. I lost money. You think that doesn't come back around? I don't owe you anything. Oh, but you do, he smirked. Especially now that you're living with Mr. Stock Market. Nella's blood ran cold. How do you? You really think this city doesn't talk? He said. Your name's already floating around some blogs. She stepped back. You need to leave. He leaned in. Or what? You'll paint me out of your life too. A firm voice cut through the tension. She said leave. The library security guard had approached silently, eyes trained on Ben. Ben scoffed. Whatever. This isn't over. He turned and walked out, his boots dragging mud behind him. Nella didn't breathe until the door clicked shut. But deep down, she knew the door had already opened to something she couldn't control. By nightfall, the air in the house had shifted. Nella sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at a photo she hadn't taken. It was her, barefoot in the garden, laughing as she held Tessa's paint-splattered hands. Silas was in the background, sleeves rolled up, watching with that half-smile only Tessa ever pulled from him. The caption, from street corner to corner office? Who is Nella Brooks? Then, in smaller font, new mystery woman spotted at billionaire Silas Maddox's residence. Nella's hand shook. The article wasn't long, but it was enough. Photos from the park. One from outside the library. An old mugshot from a years past bench warrant she'd already cleared. Tessa's name was there too. Nella shut the screen off and stood. Downstairs, Silas was in the kitchen, pouring a drink he hadn't planned to touch tonight. You saw it? She asked from the doorway. He nodded once. I'm sorry, she said. For what? He asked, his tone flat. For existing? She stepped forward. I didn't bring this on purpose. I know. But it still came. He stared into his glass. My assistant's already fielding questions from 2 board members. The partners are spooked. They'll recover. But it's a storm now. I should go, she said quietly. Silas's head lifted. No, you don't understand. I do, he cut in. But this is not on you. Tessa came padding in then, clutching her plush bunny. She blinked sleepily at them both. Why are you sad? Nella knelt down immediately. We're just talking, baby. Tessa leaned her head on Nella's shoulder. Did someone say something mean? Nella swallowed the lump in her throat. Yes. Tessa didn't even pause. Then they don't know you. She kissed Nella's cheek and wandered back upstairs, bunny in tow. Nella looked at Silas, but he was already shaking his head. If you're going to leave, do it for a reason that's real. Not for gossip. I just don't want to be the reason she gets hurt. She's already chosen you. Silence settled between them, but this time it didn't feel safe. It felt like the edge of something breaking. Rain returned to San Francisco the next morning, steady and soft. The kind that coated windows and turned sidewalks slick without warning. Nella packed before sunrise. She folded every borrowed item with care. The robe, the spare clothes, even the art supplies Tessa had left on her nightstand. A single note sat beside them. She didn't cry until she stepped into the hallway. Mrs. Levet was already up, setting out mugs for coffee. She froze when she saw Nella holding her bag. "Leaving?" she asked, not unkindly. Nella nodded, eyes glassy. "She won't understand," Mrs. Levet said gently. "She'll heal faster than if I stay and things get worse." Mrs. Levet didn't argue. She stepped forward and hugged her tight, whispering, "You deserved every bit of the light that found you here. Don't forget that." Nella pulled away with a broken smile. "Tell her I love her." Then she was gone. Upstairs, Tessa awoke to an empty house. Downstairs, Silas found the envelope resting against the vase in the entryway. He read it once. "Thank you for showing me light. I'm sorry for the shadows I brought." He didn't pace. He just stood there, the weight of her absence sinking in like cement. By noon, the house was silent again. Tessa pushed her lunch away. "Did Miss Nella leave because I told her about the article?" she asked. Silas knelt beside her, voice thick. "No, baby. She left. Because I didn't stop her." That night, the bed felt too wide, the house too quiet, the porch too cold. Silas sat at the edge of Tessa's bed, watching her sleep. Her bunny lay curled in her arms, the ears nearly worn through. He brushed a curl from her forehead and whispered, "I'm going to fix this." Then he stood. He didn't pick up his phone. He didn't call an assistant. He got in his car and drove. Because some storms weren't meant to be waited out. Some were meant to be chased through, until you reached the person worth it all. Silas didn't use GPS. He remembered what Nella had said in passing. "The Mission District Library has a community center 2 blocks down. I used to walk by and think, maybe one day." He parked across the street from a red brick building with faded murals and folding chairs stacked just inside the entrance. The place was alive with children, running, laughing, clutching paintbrushes and paper plates full of color. A volunteer was handing out snacks. Someone had set up a folding table for finger painting. And at the far end of the room, bent slightly at the waist, was Nella. She wore a soft blue apron now, streaked with green and orange. Her braid was looped loosely over one shoulder, strands escaping from the sides. Her hands were covered in paint, and she was laughing. Full, rich, unguarded. A little girl tugged her hand, showing her a wobbly heart-shaped painting. Nella clapped. "That's perfect, sweetheart." She didn't see him at first. Silas didn't interrupt. He stood near the door, watching, absorbing. Something inside him slowed, then tightened, because he realized this wasn't a woman running from herself. This was a woman stepping back into who she used to be, and he hadn't lost her. Not yet. Finally, she turned. Her smile faltered. Her hand dropped. He stepped forward. No performance. No grand gesture. Just a man walking toward the one thing he couldn't rebuild with money. She met him halfway. "You found me," she said softly. "I didn't stop looking." Nella folded her arms, not defensive, just bracing. "What do you want, Silas?" He didn't flinch. He reached into his coat and pulled out a slim folder. "Children's book series," he said. "About healing. Real contract. Real publisher. They want illustrations. And there's only one person I trust with them." Nella looked down at the folder in her hands, then back at him. "You still trust me?" "With my life," he said. "And with Tessa's." Her eyes filled. The hallway behind her buzzed with voices. But in that moment, everything else faded. And she nodded. Once. Yes. The gallery wasn't large, but it was full. Kids clutched their parents' hands, pointing at framed artwork hung at their eye level. A series of watercolor pages danced along the wall. Some of rain clouds, some of blankets, some of children curled into comforting arms. Near the entrance, a plaque read, "The Healing Heart Series, illustrated by N. Brooks, written by S. Maddox, in honor of every child who needed to be heard." Nella stood off to the side, arms crossed loosely, wearing a cream blouse and dark jeans that still smelled like lemon from the morning's ironing. Her hair was pulled into a high bun, but a few curls had rebelliously fallen free. She looked composed. She wasn't. Tessa tugged her sleeve. "Can I show them the one I helped paint?" "Of course, sweetheart." Silas was across the room, deep in conversation with a publisher, but his eyes never strayed too far from Nella. The event was more than a launch, it was a statement. A quiet defiance against the narrative that had tried to frame her. Bloggers had gone silent. Public interest had shifted. The ones who mattered were here. A local news anchor whispered to a photographer near the back, "Is that the woman from the story last month?" Another woman replied, "She doesn't look like a headline. She looks like someone who fought for peace." Mrs. Levet arrived just as the music started, soft acoustic strings filling the space like calm air. She handed Nella a small envelope. "What's this?" Nella asked. "A note," Mrs. Levet said. Tessa insisted. Nella opened it. "You made our house better, but you made me better too. I love you, Tessa." Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away just as Silas approached. "You ready?" he asked. "For what?" He smiled. "My part." She frowned. "You're not." He was already stepping onto the small platform the gallery had set up for remarks. He took the mic, looked out at the guests, then glanced only once at her. "I met a woman on a sidewalk," he said. "She wasn't looking for help. She was trying to disappear quietly. But my daughter saw her. And because of that, I saw her too." People shifted, listening closer. "She didn't just paint my daughter's joy. She helped me find my own." He stepped down from the platform and walked directly toward her. The entire room watched, but he saw only her. Silas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Nella's heart stopped. The crowd behind them fell into a hush. Tessa, now clinging to Mrs. Levet's hand, gasped audibly. "He's doing it." Silas opened the box to reveal a simple ring. No flash, no excess. Just gold, shaped with care. He dropped to one knee. There was no speech, no scripted proposal. Just a man looking up at a woman he thought he'd lost. "Nella Brooks," he said, "will you marry me?" The room held its breath. Nella stared at him, stunned, unmoving. Not because she didn't want this, but because she did. Entirely, completely. She took one shaky step forward, then another. She placed both hands on his face and whispered, "Yes. God, yes." The gallery erupted. Applause. Cheers. A few joyful tears from corners of the room. Tessa ran toward them and crashed into both of their legs. "Now I have a mommy," she shouted. Nella scooped her up, burying her face in Tessa's curls. Silas stood, slipping the ring onto her finger. Fit perfectly. Mrs. Levet was already pulling out her phone. "We're having a backyard wedding, I hope." They did. 2 weeks later, under a canopy of string lights and wildflowers, they exchanged vows with only 30 people present, each one who mattered. No press, no spectacle, just a family being made on purpose. And in the final pages of their first book, titled The Healing Heart, a watercolor painting showed 3 figures at a small wooden table. A girl, a woman, a man. They were painting together. Above their heads, a single brushstroke formed a clumsy but unmistakable red heart. At the bottom of the page, in Nella's own handwriting, it read, "Sometimes all it takes is one little heart to change 3 lives forever." The new house wasn't bigger. It was brighter. They didn't move far, just to a quiet street nestled between tall trees and children's laughter. It had a wraparound porch and a garden that Nella and Tessa planted together every Saturday. Silas still worked, but he came home earlier. He set his phone on silent more often. Sometimes he helped with painting frames for the second book. Nella's art studio took up the back sunroom. Sunlight poured through the wide windows, casting soft patterns across her sketches and palettes. She kept Tessa's paintings pinned along the wall, even the messy ones. One morning, Nella walked past the guest room, the same one she had once curled up in, unsure if she belonged. It was now a reading nook, full of pillows, kids' books, and sunlight. Place made for comfort, made for staying. She stopped at the doorway. Mrs. Levet, arms full of fresh linens, paused beside her. It still surprises you, doesn't it? Nella nodded. Every day. She chose you, you know, Mrs. Levet said. That little girl. She picked you before anyone else had the chance. I know. That night, after dinner, Tessa handed her a folded drawing. It's us, she said. You and me and Daddy. And that's our house. Nella unfolded it. The lines were crooked. The colors ran outside the shapes. But there they were, 3 smiling stick figures holding hands beneath a big blue sky. She blinked back tears. I love it. Tessa smiled. You can hang it in your studio. Silas stepped in from the hallway, catching only the last line. Her studio, huh? Tessa nodded with pride. She's famous now. Nella laughed. Famous is a stretch. He leaned in, kissing her cheek. Not in this house. The porch lights flickered on. Outside, the garden was blooming. Inside, the house felt full of warmth, of laughter, of things that didn't need to be said to be true. 1 year after the gallery launch, The Healing Heart became more than just a book. It became a curriculum in 5 schools across the city. Teachers printed out Nella's illustrations for art projects. Counselors used the story to start hard conversations about loss, trust, and family. But for Nella, the real impact happened far from the spotlight. She started hosting Saturday morning classes at the Mission Community Center. Not workshops, conversations with color. Tables of children painting what they couldn't say out loud. Some painted quiet rain. Others golden suns. One boy painted nothing for 3 weeks. Then one day, he dipped his brush into black and painted a single dot. Nella didn't ask what it meant. She just nodded and told him it was perfect. That evening, Silas waited outside in the car. Tessa was in the back seat with a book in her lap and a new Band-Aid on her elbow. When Nella opened the door, Tessa grinned. I saved you the last snack. Snack? Nella asked, sliding in. Tessa handed her a crushed granola bar. It's a love snack. Silas chuckled from the front seat. Don't ask questions. Just accept it. Nella took a bite. Tastes like glitter and crumbs. Exactly, Tessa said. As they pulled away from the curb, a mother and daughter passed them on the sidewalk. The little girl held the Healing Heart tight to her chest. Nella turned to look. The mother gave her a nod of recognition. Not fame, not gossip, just quiet respect. Back home, as the sun set behind the trees, Nella stood on the back porch with Silas. The wind brushed past them, gentle and cool. He handed her a small box. Inside, another ring. This one thinner, with 3 tiny birthstones, hers, his, and Tessa's. Thought it was time to make something official. She looked at him. We're already a family. He nodded. This is just the part we get to wear. She kissed him, slow and grateful. And from the upstairs window, Tessa shouted, You! They laughed. And beneath the porch light, Nella whispered, I never knew healing could look like this. Silas smiled. That's because you painted it. The final book in the Healing Heart trilogy was released on a Tuesday morning without fanfare. No press release, no book tour, no cameras. That evening, in their backyard, the family gathered for a quiet dinner beneath the same canopy where they'd exchanged vows. Tessa wore her official illustrator assistant sash and twirled between bites of pasta. Mrs. Levet baked a lemon cake and scolded Silas for trying to cut it too early. Nella sat back in her chair, the breeze tugging at the hem of her skirt, watching the people who now made up her world. You okay? Silas asked softly, leaning in. She nodded. More than okay. You sure? She looked around, at Tessa's laughter, at Mrs. Levet lighting a second candle, at the wildflowers blooming along the garden wall. I used to think survival was enough, she said. But this is living. He reached for her hand under the table. You saved me too, you know, he said. She squeezed his fingers. No, we saved each other. Tessa climbed into her lap, icing on her cheek. Mommy, she said, can we write another book? Nella kissed the top of her head. What would it be about? Tessa thought for a long moment, then whispered, about how families get made. Even if they don't start that way. Nella's throat caught. She looked at Silas. He nodded. "Let's write it together," she said. Later that night, long after the dishes were cleared and Tessa had fallen asleep curled between their pillows, Nella stood by the window, sketchbook in hand. She began to draw. A porch light, a little girl, a woman with tired eyes, a man standing just behind her, hands in his pockets, heart wide open, and beneath them, in delicate script, all it took was one little voice saying, "She looks hungry. Can we say hello?" That one choice rewrote all their lives. If this story touched you, tell us in the comments. Who's the one person who changed your life when you needed it most? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard more in this world, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Mr. Hearthline Stories for more stories that remind us of what still matters.